It all started with a video that initially seemed fake. A blurry image, a shaky camera, and against the backdrop of arid soil, something resembling a fish, slowly, as if reluctantly, crawls forward. It looked like a scene from a science fiction movie, only it was happening in reality. Amazingly, the creature was indeed not swimming but moving across the ground. Without water, without apparent fear, and it wasn't a mistake, not a singular anomaly. These fish exist, and they really can crawl on land. We are not talking about mutants or prehistoric creatures. This is a real species known to scientists, but until recently underestimated. Their unique feature is the ability to move on land, using their fins like makeshift hands. This is not just a rare behavior, but an example of active adaptation, real living evolution in action. Scientists who studied them in their natural habitat were astounded. These fish don't just come out of the water to avoid danger. They can travel significant distances on land and do so regularly. But the most important question that arose for the researchers was simple and unsettling. Why? What drives the fish to leave the water, its usual safe environment, and crawl across the scorching ground? The answer turned out to be far more shocking than expected. It was under the thickness of sand that scientists made a discovery that changed the entire understanding of the behavior of these creatures. Found under the sand. A team of researchers working in Africa, in a region where rivers dry up for long months, stumbled upon strange grooves in the sand. They were straight, as if drawn by a small tractor. At first, it was assumed that these were reptile tracks, but the depth and shape of the grooves were puzzling. Inside, the sand were microscopic scales and traces of slime. Only one type of creature could have left such marks: a fish. When the excavator dug deeper into the dry riverbed, it unearthed not just a fish. It was a specimen, still alive, buried in the sand, waiting for moisture. That's when they began to analyze and understood. In front of them was not just a drought survivor. It was a migrant. A fish that moves across land. Amazingly, such cases were previously considered exceptions. However, after discovering an entire group of individuals under the sand, it became clear. This is systematic behavior, not a singular escape from drought. These fish are capable of sensing moisture in the soil from dozens of yards away. They detect water and crawl towards it, using their fins and body bends. Their route is not chaotic movement, but a clear path towards the source of moisture. And each such journey is a risky but deliberate step. But who are they? Where did they come from, and how did fish learn to live a double life? Hidden migrants. Meet the members of the genus Periophthalmus, more commonly known as mudskippers. These creatures outwardly resemble ordinary fish, but in reality, they are an amphibious phenomenon. Their evolution has moved towards adapting to life on the edge. Between water and land, they can breathe through their skin and the mucous membrane of their mouth, store moisture, and their fins serve as supporting limbs. Some members of this genus live in mangrove swamps, but the most shocking are those that inhabit drying rivers and shores. However, not all land-dwelling fish belong to the same species. Research has shown that several genera of tropical fish have acquired the skill of short movements. On land, some move over mud, some over grass, and some over scorching sand. The reason is the struggle for survival. In conditions where bodies of water quickly disappear, staying in the water means perishing. And nature chose the bold ones. The uniqueness lies in the fact that the migrations of these fish do not occur spontaneously, but follow a precisely calculated route. Some species even remember old paths, and they pass them on to their offspring through behavioral patterns. But all of this would just be an interesting fact if it weren't for one but. Living evolution. Before the eyes of scientists, what once seemed impossible, a fish essentially turning into an amphibian right before their eyes. Evolution doesn't always take millions of years. Sometimes a few dozen generations are enough for irreversible changes to begin. Research has shown that fish migrating over land start to experience changes in their internal organs. A special type of pulmonary ventilation develops, the skin thickens, and denser scales appear to protect against moisture evaporation. Even their eyes become more protruding to see better outside of water. This is what shocked the scientific community. We are used to thinking of evolution as a slow process, but here, on the dried-up shores, it seems to have accelerated. The fish are not just surviving, they are actively adapting to land. This is not a temporary adaptation, but a permanent transformation. Already, these species can endure droughts. Underground, they feed on insects on the surface and navigate by scent. Each new individual is a step towards a completely new species. But the most astonishing thing is not how they change, but how they hunt. Hunting without water, when you hear the phrase, a fish hunts on land. The first instinct is to laugh, but then comes amazement because they really do it, and they do it effectively. Some of these fish are capable of sneaking up on small insects, freezing, and then suddenly leaping to catch their prey with their mouths. Their movements resemble a miniature alligator. Only an alligator is a reptile. And this is a fish. Yes, a fish that hunts like a predator on a solid surface. The secret lies in their unique musculature and spine structure. The strikes they make are coordinated with split-second precision. And all of this without water, without a fin impulse. Only muscles, strength, and precision. In some regions, locals have already learned to use these fish to combat insects. They even toss them into gardens, where they hunt for several days before crawling back to the water. But like any predatory creature, these fish bring with them not only benefits, but also threats. Invisible threat. When it comes to predators, our imagination conjures up sharks, tigers, or at the very least, snakes. But a fish slowly crawling on land is more comical than frightening. However, ecologists observing these migrations have sounded the alarm. Because these creatures are beginning to alter the balance of the ecosystems they invade. The problem is that such fish are not just exploring new territories. They are actively displacing local inhabitants. At first glance, it's just a small movement in search of water. But it is an invasion into an environment where other organisms are not adapted to compete with such invaders. In some regions of Asia and East Africa, it has been observed how such fish have decimated populations of local invertebrates. And in Australia, there was an instance where their appearance coincided with a sharp decline in the numbers of local amphibians. Paradoxically, these are not invasive species introduced by humans. These are natural inhabitants who have simply started using a new strategy, and that makes it even scarier. Because stopping or controlling them is practically impossible. What will happen if they start spreading massively on land? Who will be the next victim in the chain of displacements? And all of this has only intensified after a phenomenon recorded at one remarkable point on the map. The Mozambique phenomenon. Southeast Africa, the territory between dried-up riverbeds and humid coastal areas. It was here that an outbreak of activity occurred, which questioned all previous notions about fish movements. For the first time, dozens of individuals were recorded leaving their usual water body and heading across open terrain towards a completely different ecosystem. It did not look like a panicked escape. It was an organized, directed migration. The fish chose their timing. Early morning, when the humidity still lingered after the night and the Earth's surface had not yet heated up. They moved in groups, sometimes stopping in the shade of rocks, then continuing on their way again. Scientists set up cameras and sensors, observed their routes, analyzed their behavior, and came to a startling conclusion. The fish navigate not only by the soil's moisture, but also by the Earth's magnetic field. This was the first hypothesis explaining their precision. These fish are not just crawling aimlessly. They know where they are going. This is a strategic migration, and it goes beyond all conventional boundaries. But the most astonishing thing is the traces they leave behind. A sandy trail. When researchers began analyzing the surface over which the fish moved, they noticed a strange pattern of grooves. It turned out that with each movement, the fish leave behind not just a trail, but a kind of signature. A path with a repeating pattern, as if a natural engraving. The shape of the tracks resembled those left by snakes, but with distinctive fin imprints. In some areas, it is visible how the fish slowed down, as if surveying its surroundings. In others, on the contrary, it sped up, as if sensing the proximity of water. These tracks were first discovered by accident, but soon they began to be searched for intentionally. This made it possible to find places where the fish had been even several days later. Moreover, the tracks began to be used to create migration maps. This became a real breakthrough in the study of the behavior of these creatures. But surprisingly, it's not only how the fish move, but also what they use to do it. Their body is a true biological machine, designed to survive on the edge of two elements. The flexibility of anatomy. From the outside, it looks strange. A small fish with an elongated body and wide pectoral fins. But inside, it's a true marvel of evolution. The spine of these creatures can bend at incredible angles, providing them with maneuverability even on land. The pectoral fins function like limbs, propelling the body forward. And the tail creates a short but powerful thrust, helping to overcome areas with dry sand. Some species are capable of jumping up several inches, as if leaping over obstacles. The skin is covered with mucus that retains moisture. This mucus serves several functions at once: cooling, protection from bacteria, and aiding in breathing through the skin. What is particularly remarkable is how they filter air through the oral cavity, enriching the blood with oxygen without using gills. Every part of their body is the result of long and relentless adaptation, and this entire system works with one goal: to survive until the next water. And yet, even the most perfect biomechanics mean nothing if the environment becomes hostile. In this regard, fish face another problem: the rapidly changing climate. The war for humidity. At first glance, it seems that for fish, it's important just to find water. But it's much more complicated. For successful migration, they need a certain air humidity, surface temperature, and even wind speed. If it's too hot, the mucus evaporates and the fish die. If it's too dry, the skin cracks. If it's too windy, the body cools down and moving becomes difficult. Each venture onto land is like a special operation. Fish wait for the moment when weather conditions are perfect. Some freeze in shady pits for several hours waiting for the heat to subside. Others take the risk and crawl in the moonlight to avoid overheating. Due to climate change, such windows of opportunity are becoming increasingly rare, and this threatens the survival of the species themselves. What used to be a reliable rescue strategy is now becoming a game of roulette. That's why scientists have started to ponder, what if these fish are not just migrating, but are moving in search of a new home? Weather, impulse. When biologists began to correlate fish migration data with weather conditions, the picture became strikingly clear. Each mass movement coincided with abrupt changes in the atmosphere, sudden downpours, pressure surges, and changes in humidity. These were not coincidences, but a pattern. It turned out that fish sense weather changes long before they occur. Their bodies have sensitive receptors that detect minimal fluctuations in pressure and the electromagnetic field. Thanks to this, they seem to predict the right moment to come ashore. For example, before an unexpected tropical rain, when the humidity in the air rises, fish leave their burrows en masse and start moving towards potential bodies of water. They know that soon the ground will become softer and the temperature will drop. These hours are their window of opportunity. The weather impulse becomes a command for them to act. And this makes them similar not to fish, but to birds sensing the approach of a storm. Only instead of flying, they crawl. Instead of the sky, dusty ground. But if weather signals become increasingly unpredictable, what awaits these creatures in the future? Global expansion. Initially, the migrations of such fish were limited to their native ecosystems, but climate change, human activity, and accidental transport have begun to change the geography of their habitats. Today, these crawling creatures appear in places where they have never been seen before. There have already been recorded instances of such species appearing in South America, on the coasts of India, and in the tropical parts of Australia. Some of them may have arrived there with the ballast water of ships, others with currents caused by floods. But the fact remains, these fish are beginning to conquer the land. They carry their eggs in the mud, can remain motionless for several days waiting for moisture. Most importantly, they know how to adapt. In new conditions, they quickly modify their behavior, adapting to local weather cycles and terrain features. Ecologists are sounding the alarm. If such fish spread widely across tropical and subtropical zones, the consequences for the local fauna will be unpredictable. It's not about dozens of individuals, but a complete change in food chains. And as is often the case in science, a large-scale threat initially causes a scandal. A scientific scandal. When the first publications about crawling fish appeared, part of the scientific community treated them as a curiosity. But when reports of migrations, ecosystem changes, and behavior resembling intelligence emerged, the reaction was different, and not always friendly. Some major universities refused to fund the research, considering it insignificant. There were also those who outright stated that it was an attempt to create a sensation. One biologist in private correspondence called the situation zoological infoterrorism. But a group of young scientists continued their work, funding projects through crowdfunding. Their videos and photos went viral. Scientific journals began publishing peer-reviewed articles, and a response quickly followed. Several institutes abruptly changed their stance, stating that they were closely monitoring the situation. Soon, an international conference was convened where it was officially recognized for the first time that terrestrial fish migration is not a theory, but a reality. And this means that we are living in a moment of visible evolution. And then the question arose, where is all this leading? The future of fish. If today fish are crawling on land, tomorrow they will start staying on it longer and longer. They already have everything necessary for the next step. Organs that function without water, sensitivity to air, predatory habits. Geneticists have calculated that at this rate of change, certain species could fully adapt to life on land within a few hundred generations. This is not much considering the rapid turnover and high survival rate. They will start using burrows, hunting at dusk, developing hearing and vision. Some of them will completely abandon water bodies. And then a new type of creature will emerge. Landfish not as a temporary phenomenon, but as a new biological class. While we argue about dinosaurs and evolution, nature itself is giving us a spectacle in real time. And the question is no longer whether fish can come onto land, but how far they are willing to go. When will the fish stand up? The latest footage that went viral on the internet was filmed in a tropical forest. A fish, covered in dust, slowly crawls between the tree roots, as if sensing that this is its new environment. It doesn't thrash about, it isn't frightened, but moves forward. confidently. And that's the most frightening part. We used to think that the boundary between fish and land animals was crossed hundreds of millions of years ago. But now we see how this can happen again, before our eyes, in real time. This is not science fiction. This is not fiction. This is evolution, clad in scales, moving its fins and crawling towards a new reality. And while we marvel, these fish make their way, slowly, persistently, silently, through sand, dust, roots, leaves, because the boundary between water and land is no longer as reliable as we thought. And perhaps one morning we will wake up, step into the backyard, and find that the fish have truly risen